Hey, Squirt!
Why do you always call me that?
Because you are small and insignificant.
What? Why would you say that?
And your hair's like an 8 out of 10 at best. Excellent! Ha ha ha! Now I have enough of your tears to start a whole list. Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, welcome one and all to a completely 100% objective look at the weapons in Monster Hunter Rise that is not at all based around my playstyle in Monster Hunter or my preferences as a video game player. My decisions in this video may be based on extremely unique experiences, but that doesn't make them any less of an indisputable fact. Oh, wait, it does? Right. Then I suppose it's time for my entirely subjective Monster Hunter Rise weapon tier list. Not based around performance or anything like that, but simply how much fun that I have had playing them and exploring their movesets and changes in Rise. My tiers are quite simple. F tier at the bottom, S tier at the top. Though of course they do all have their own secret meanings that I would never reveal to you. God damn it. We're gonna go in somewhat of a random order here to keep you guessing at every point, starting off with Longsword. This weapon is a ton of fun in Rise. The changes to the EI counter to make it build Spirit Gauge instead of spend Spirit Gauge is a really engaging gameplay shift from Longsword in Iceborne. Making Helmbreaker a silkbind as well is a very interesting decision, but Sakura Slash is very cool as the potential replacement. All in all, I consider Longsword to be an amazing weapon in Monster Hunter Rise that you can enjoy if you have enjoyed any version of Longsword from a previous game. Even if Helmbreaker isn't your style, you can completely just ignore it and choose another option, which is pretty cool to me. As a result, this weapon is just out of the upper echelon of my favorite weapons in Rise so far, sitting up in the A tier. Then after that, we have the bow. And bow is an interesting one to rate at the current moment, as according to various people who have been looking through the game files, the way that bow currently performs is a legitimate bug, with it not properly adhering to elemental modifiers. That combined with an animation skip sort of brings the whole thing into a territory that I'm not really too comfortable perfectly judging. However, the skeleton here is still notable, and the skeleton is very enjoyable. The varying shot types for the bows adds a very significant layer of complexity that definitely has a payoff, as it lets you create incredibly specific and varied builds for different monsters. But it will take quite a bit of patience to understand which bow that you want for which situation, as their true power isn't quite as easy to discern as looking at an attack number and sharpness modifier like for most weapons. Dragon Piercer is more fun than it was previously to me, especially when combined with Dodge Bolt, which is a big plus as well. The Silkbind aerial assault move is incredible, but my main noticeable dislike is that they removed the ability to start a combo with your power shot, which I realize shouldn't matter too much, but it changes how the weapon feels to me. It changes the base combo that you go around shooting the weapon with, and as a result of every one of these things put together, I have put the bow in tier B. It's still incredible. I have some more learning to do, and the numbers are literally not as intended, but the actual playstyle and weapon here are very solid. Coming up after that is the hammer. And if you've seen any of my videos since the release of Rise, you'll notice that this is one of the weapons that I've played the most by a fair margin, and there is a good reason for that. In Iceborne, hammer was my main weapon. I loved the massive singular hits combined with the mobility afforded by the charge attacks and the clutch claw combo especially. In Rise, I found myself feeling completely at home. The donks were just as redonkulous. The mobility, if anything, had become more mobile. They added the charge switch as a function far more interesting than the power charge that it replaced from World. Water Strike is an incredible move, and giving the hammer a parry is just so much fun, but I don't even find myself using it a crazy amount because I'm always charging my hammer in an attempt to launch off one of the magnificent silkbinds, most notably Impact Crater, which is quite possibly just my favorite singular attack in the entire game. It just feels so meaty and strong, but requires surprisingly precise aim and an understandable understanding of monster fighting patterns. As you can imagine from the way that I've spoken about it so far, hammer is my first entry into the S tier, where I full-heartedly believe that it belongs. Next up, we're going to talk about the sword and shield, and my god guys, what a fantastic playstyle Capcom has given us in Rise for this weapon. weapon. You've got your perfect rush from Iceborne, which is an entertaining combo to get to do. You've got the ability to launch into your falling shield bash as a silkbind from 10 feet away from the monster, the ability to do it a foot from the monster without costing a wire bug, and one of my other favorite attacks in Iceborne, the Metsu Shoryu fucking Geki, which is just a multi-stage blunt damage counter that makes you feel like a god when you hit it. All of this together puts Sword and Shield, for me, solidly in the A tier. The only reason it doesn't breach into S is because the Metsu Shoryu Geki isn't quite spammable. I wish that Wirebug Whisper made enough of a difference for this Silkbind to make it a repeatable playstyle rather than just a special attack to pull out occasionally, but to each their own. It is what it is. SNS is in A tier for me. It's great. Next up is Chargeblade, which, to be honest, I am a bit conflicted on. There are a ton of positives. I love the playstyle of just focusing fully on file damage with your build, parrying every time the monster attacks, and immediately unleashing a super amped element discharge, but I cannot help but note the shrinkage of the hitbox of super amped element discharge files in Rise.
Well, I just got back from swimming in the pool, and the water was cold.
They feel smaller, it feels harder to hit this attack properly, and a part of that may be that we are limited to 5 files now instead of being able to reach 6 like we were able to previously, but I feel like the majority of the time that I hit the parry, I'm better off just not launching the SAED and instead saving the files for afterwards and lining it up separately, which I understand is the risk and reward of the weapon, but it's just on the cusp of feeling amazing, and instead to me winds up feeling just really, really good. It's still a wildly unique and fun playstyle in Rise, but it could have been just a touch more satisfying in my opinion as well. The Savage Axe mode makes its return from Iceborne. However, it just doesn't really fit in perfectly with the Silkbinds that the Chargeblade has to me. It works, but it feels like it could work better. Honestly, I wish you could have the counter Silkbind along with Axe Hopper, so you could counter to charge the files and then Axe Hopper at will, but seeing as they replace each other, that dream is an unfortunate non-reality, and as such I am putting Chargeblade in tier B, which I think is very fair. For all of the criticism that I just leveled at it, it came from a place of love for the way that it could feel and the way that I feel like they intended for it to feel. I still think that it is miraculous, fun, and the playstyle is completely unique from one that you'll get with any other weapon in Monster Hunter Rise. I will continue to play this weapon when it tickles my fancy for the rest of the life cycle of this game. After this comes its technical weapon brother, the Switchaxe, which in my opinion is just the straight up best that it has ever been. Every weapon to me in Rise really has reached some sort of a new level of interesting. The switch skills and silkbinds in combination have made everything just appeal to me more than they have in previous games, but there's something really understated about the changes to Switchaxe that I just don't hear people talking about enough, even if people are clearly using the Switchaxe way more in Rise than they were in previous games. Firstly, it's the switch skills. Every one of Switchaxe's switch skills is genuinely viable for situations that frequently happen in the game, giving it a crazy amount of variety within the weapon between even Switchaxe players. The ability to power up your axe so you can charge up your amped state faster is amazing for impact file Switchaxe, but the weapon charges so fast with a non-impact file that you will never even feel the need to do it when using those weapons, adding once again more variety to the playstyle of the Switchaxe. The fact that your amped file state now affects your axe hits as well with elemental files is one of the best decisions that I think they've ever made for a weapon, especially considering the rapid morph skill being added to this game and how perfectly this weaves into the new Switchaxe playstyle. This weapon is incredible, one step off of being perfect to me. As well, it does still technically have the big explosive finish of Zero Sum Discharge. It feels like it is missing something along the lines of an impact crater. On an entirely personal level to me, this is a list about my enjoyment of weapons and just the way that I think of weapons that I love to have that one singular moment of big pop damage. Even on a faster weapon, you can have a combo end with a particularly big pop. And while Switchaxe has a number of pop options, including one from the frickin' air, none of them feel quite impactful enough to me to satisfy that itch. Almost like the weapon as a whole is so flashy that nothing particularly stands out to me as the flashy moment, and that is the only reason that Switchaxe is slightly outside of S tier, sitting down in tier A. tight so far, huh? Yeah, I mean, in case you couldn't tell, I absolutely love Monster Hunter Rise, and the main reason for that so far is the way that the combat feels, the way that the weapons feel. Not just one weapon, but every single one. The combat just as a whole in Rise feels amazing to me. Rise is S tier. Oh, sorry, that's not a weapon. So to make up for that, let's talk about two weapons. The dual blades. This weapon had a marked improvement in Rise in my opinion. While still adhering to its original principles and ideas, this weapon has somehow managed to feel even faster and deadlier in this game than it did before. The amount of aerial shenanigans that you have, not just that you have them, but the sheer number of options for both how to get into the air and what you can do once you are in the air, really make dual blades sing. Piercing Bind is a really fun silk bind that adds a nice satisfying oomph to some of your combos, but having what is essentially an added dodge from a low-cost silk bind is an incredible addition to this weapon. It lets dual blades really keep up the aggression like it never even has before, and I think that is part of what makes me really appreciate Rise dual blade as much as I do. The aggression levels feel unmatched. In Feral Demon mode, your dodges literally are attacks. If you want a weapon that makes you feel like some sort of unhinged savage beast just unleashing everything you have at the monster, dual blades is perfect for you. If you like dancing around the monster near effortlessly, gracefully avoiding attacks while never giving up the attack, dual blades is perfect for you. That said, this list is entirely about the fun that I have had with weapons, and while I struggle to explain why, I can't deny that I've just enjoyed this weapon slightly less than those that I put in the very top tier. So dual blades is once again going to sit atop the A tier, just off of perfection in my eyes. After that, it's time to talk about the light bowgun, which is quite good in Rise. I enjoy it more here than I have in other Monster Hunter games, and these silk binds are really cool. Having those movement options that also power you up in various ways is a great addition to the weapon, and the big close-up blast is fun on occasion as well. This one, unfortunately, I don't have a massive amount to say with. I'm not a ranged player quite so much as I am a melee player, with bow being my main ranged weapon even then. The weapon is great in Rise, this one. I've had fun using it, but for whatever reason, I just on a personal level, don't really enjoy the playstyle of gunning in Monster Hunter. It always makes me feel strangely disconnected from the hunt compared to other weapons. Without dropping too far into the next part of this, let me also hop onto heavy bowgun real quick. This weapon I feel developed its identity a bit better in Rise, making it more distinct from light bowgun for sure, and as a result making each of these two weapons more fun by comparison. The silk binds are very enjoyable, but again I run into the same problem as I did with light bowgun. For whatever reason, I just find these weapons inherently less satisfying to play. That said, given that I still recognize all of the strong points of those weapons and the way that you can use them for people that don't have these feelings, they are both placed in my B tier, as I still have enjoyed them both a fair amount regardless. Next up then we have Lance, the stalwart protector of the lands. This is one I'm a bit surprised by myself on. I enjoyed the hell out of this weapon in the demo for Monster Hunter Rise, but for whatever reason the shine has just dulled a little bit for me in the full game. I still think that the weapon is fantastic. The Instaguard parry is fun to use, and the silk binds are both good in variety and enjoyable to put into action. The charged up wide sweep is a cool addition as well. However, I can't deny that it just doesn't feel like it flows the same way that it used to, which I know is probably a strange complaint to some people. I won't pretend that I have mained Lance in a prior Monster Hunter game because I simply haven't, but after having played it within other games, there is a certain rhythm that you get used to, like beating a drum. The Lance doesn't stop attacking. Poke, 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 reset, poke, 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 reset, and while the wide sweep is quite a fun addition, it sort of messes with that stable rhythm that Lance has, which again doesn't make the playstyle objectively worse, but I sort of like that rhythm personally, I guess. It sort of felt like the heartbeat of the Lance to me. The silk binds are undeniably fantastic, giving you a parry that increases your strength based on the damage that you absorbed, as well as a magnificent movement tool that no other weapon can even try to match, allowing you to stay attached to a monster after as much as physically possible. It is still a great time to play the weapon, but it sort of feels like some of the changes are contradictory to the base concept of Lance, to me, the way that I see Lance at least. Lance is all about the constant onslaught, right? The poke, poke, poke. And a lot of the new switch skills and changes to the weapon seem to benefit a much slower, more methodical playstyle that, while enjoyable, just doesn't quite mesh with how I personally view Lance. That feeling is the main reason that I have put Lance in tier B. I still enjoy playing the weapon quite a bit in its own way, it just doesn't feel quite the same to me anymore is all, so B for me. Moving on then to Greatsword. Sorry, I had to pause there. Wherever he is in the world, Josh just stopped and shuddered and let out a pained roar at the sound of me saying that word. But yes, and well, you may be surprised to learn that my feelings on this weapon have definitely picked up in Monster Hunter Rise. I will keep this as PG as possible so as not to upset Josh, but I've been a bit attached to the weapon recently. In general, the big thing with Greatsword has always been that it is very slow and very methodical, and arguably requires more knowledge of monster fighting patterns to use perfectly than any other weapon in the game. In Monster Hunter World, this evolved into True Charge Slash, the ultimate version of that idea. I liked that, but I found it very rooted. Remember, I was a hammer main in Iceborne, and in essence, what is hammer but a slightly faster and less damaging greatsword with far greater mobility? So, what did Rise do for this weapon? Well, they added Rage Slash as a switch skill for True Charge Slash, and Rage Slash is just another of my favorite attacks in the game, so that should probably sum up how I feel about it. The ability to tank an incredibly strong hit from a monster and then just "no you" right back at them is an indescribably fun activity to do on loop. On top of that, my main concern playing Greatsword has always been the mobility, and holy mother above, did Rise fix that with silkbinds. You are no longer anchored hard to the floor by any means. You can sheathe in an instant with movement involved. You can fling yourself forward a good distance into your second attack of the combo, and this combination is just so unbelievably satisfying as an entire gameplay style. As such, Greatsword is in my S tier in Monster Hunter Rise. Especially the last couple of weeks, I've just been finding myself a bit addicted to the playstyle, the same way that I got addicted to Hammer before it, and another weapon that I have not yet spoken about yet. It just feels so satisfying. I love it. Up next then is the Insect Glaive, which definitely saw a very positive gain from what we believed it to be in the demo. The aerial combo mechanic, where you do more damage depending on how many hits you have done in a row in the air, makes the aerial side of this weapon way more interesting. And working in the Iceborne Kinsect changes to just be a normal Kinsect option, allowing you to have a Kinsect that can get 2 buffs in one go, was a great decision to slightly lower the amount of time that you have to spend managing your Kinsect. The downward spike attack returns as a very fun silkbind to use, and the ability to fling yourself into the air at will with the other silkbind is pretty good too, even though Insect Glaive already had the pole vault as an option, which makes it feel a little bit of a redundancy. Well, I think there are definitely improvements here around the board. I still don't hugely enjoy the Kinsect management half of the weapon. Even though it feels sped up and streamlined a little bit in this game, it is still undeniably a "okay, I have to do this, then I can start having fun" type of mechanic for the weapon. I don't know how they could change that feeling, maybe give it a silkbind option that just instantly gives you your full set of buffs, but as it currently stands, even with the changes and how the gameplay feels both fun in the ground and in the air when it's at its maximum ability, I can't help but feel a touch frustrated by the Kinsect management every time that I play it. And so for me, Insect Glaive sits firmly in tier B, and spoiler alert, completing tier B. Moving on to our second last entry then, the Gunlance. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I haven't spent anywhere near enough time with this weapon to talk about it to the full extent that it deserves. Gunlance has always been one of the more complex weapons since I've started playing the games at least, and in Rise, this somehow has become the case even more so. There are 3 base playstyles based on your shelling type. There are switch skills that are incredibly usable and genuinely decisions that you have to make based on what style of Gunlance you're playing at the time, what monster you're fighting, as well as some very fun changes to the general gameplay loop and what attacks are just sort of worth using consistently. They made the spike attack stronger, which was one of my favorite moves in Monster Hunter World. They added goddamn Blast Dash, because of course they did. It's just wonderful. No matter where I land with my thoughts on this weapon, I feel like I will never have enough time playing it to truly develop my opinion completely and say that it is a complete opinion. And so I've decided that it is going to land in the A tier for now. Not blocked of S tier for any specific discernible reason other than a gut feeling. And hey, I'm sure I'll revisit this list in a few updates after I played each weapon way more. This is probably the weapon closest to S tier for me that isn't quite in S tier, but still it is not quite in. And then, rounding off the list as a whole, the one you all knew which was coming and which place it would go, Hunting Horn goes to tier F. Just kidding. Jesus Christ, I actually hurt a little bit on the inside even joking about that. No, it's tier S. Firmly and unbelievably tier S. I know that people who mained the weapon in previous games who have been quite conflicted about this new rendition of the weapon, but as someone who has always loved the concept of the Hunting Horn, but never quite gelled with the playstyle, in Rise I could not be happier. The choice between performance mode and echo mode makes a lasting and important impression on your playstyle that you should be changing depending on the song list of your weapon, depending on the monster that you're fighting. Earthshaker is easily in contention for the most satisfying attack in the game to me. Shockwaves being a portion of our damage is incredibly unique and makes the way that you approach a monster and their hit zones change entirely. And most importantly, it just makes me feel like an absolute badass, okay? And that's what truly matters at the end of the day. This weapon makes me feel good to use. It makes me feel like a better hunter when I'm holding it. It makes me feel like I have more control over the flow of a hunt than ever before. Slipping under a monster's attack just to bonk it in the side of the head in the same damn motion. Swapping to a healing build in the middle of a hunt when I notice people struggling to compete at quest just to keep them alive. And then the pure uniqueness of something like the Sonic Barrier melody that just makes everyone in your hunting party immune to knockbacks for a moment, which is either the strongest or most dangerous tool in your kit depending on how you use it. I not only could, but have talked for entire videos about Hunting Horn and Rise and why I feel the way that I do about it, so I'll leave it at that. But regardless of any of the other things that I've said, it feels so right to me. It feels so right to me. All right, everyone. I've been Cotton Dinosaur, and this has been my Monster Hunter Rise weapon tier list as of this point in the life cycle of the game. I've got almost 750 hours in this game, which is something I don't even want to think about for too long, and as of this point, this is where my head is at concerning the weapons. Nothing is below tier B, and that's because I genuinely enjoy and look forward to playing each of these weapons again. Rise has mastered Monster Hunter combat to me. Maybe the minutiae aren't quite where some people would like them to be, but in my opinion, hunting has never been more just purely fun. And each and every weapon is partially responsible for that feeling as a whole. Do you agree with my placement of these weapons? Are there any underrated parts of your main weapon that you think people should hear about more? Like if you like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.